Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan. And today, I kind of wanted to just gush, I guess, a little bit and talk about the 2v2 and just multiplayer formats in general for Altered and why you should be playing them or coaxing your local store to run an event, because the multiplayer format in this game is very well done and very fun. I don't know if it was intentional. Knowing some of the guys and the way they've designed the game, I'm probably sure that they knew that going forward and designed stuff specifically for this mode. In fact, some people may say it's a hot take, but me and to some extension my wife all think that maybe this is one of the best formats in the game, if not the best, because from a couple locals and from the people I've played with, and even me and my wife, we think that the 2v2 and the multiplayer format is probably the most fun you can have with this game in general, which some people might think is a hot take. So
that is going to come off as a hot take to some people, but I 100% believe it. I will say, I love Construct. Construct is a ton of fun. I've had a great amount of fun with Draft. I think Draft in Alter is an extremely enjoyable way to play the game. But Jordan, I haven't had a chance still. I haven't. Well, I'm going to say maybe I haven't made the time to play 2v2 yet. And so in this episode, we're going to be relying on you because you've had an awful lot of experience that you can talk about, at least with your locals are getting very excited about 2v2 in general, to the point where you're hosting specific 2v2 events. And you can tell us all about that in just a moment. So since I don't really even have a lot to add to this, and if people can't tell by my voice, I'm a bit under the weather. So this episode may not be to our normal extensive length. I think this is one where we might cut it off just a little earlier so that I can maybe take some pills and crash in bed. So for multiple reasons, it's great that Jordan is going to be taking over and talking a lot about this 2v2 format. Before we get there, I'm just going to really quickly mention, if you guys enjoy Fleeting Thoughts, our Altered TCG content, our podcasts, all that kind of stuff, the ways you can help us are you can always like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel, do all that interaction stuff. That all shows us that you're enjoying what we're doing, and it helps us grow the channel and get the game out to more people. And then if you are a TCG player of any other TCGs, when you're shopping on TCG Player, you can use our affiliate link instead, bit.ly/shoptcgs. Instead of just going to the TCG Player homepage, it all works like normal. You check out like normal, but then we get a little cut of the amount you spend, which is really helpful. So thank you all so much for all the ways that you support us. Let us know in the comments what you think of the 2v2 format, if you've tried it yet, or if you're going to try it now after this episode. And Jordan, now I'm going to let you take the stage. Let's tell everyone. Let's start with what has been your 2v2 experience so far, as far as events you played in, and what's going on in your store, and then just what do you think? Let's talk about it.
So as far as my personal experience, I've only got to play in 2 full events with a 2v2 format, so I'm not playing game after game after game, but it's a very promising set of games. I had a lot of fun with all of them. Like I said, I'd argue more fun than I had with the 1v1. It adds a lot of interesting layers of both to how you do your thought and what you're going to do, and even to deck building to some sort, which is for the next event that we're going to have in a little bit. I plan on working with my wife to build 2v2 specific decks, because it's been so fun using just our regular constructed decks, but while we were playing, everyone at the table is like, oh man, imagine if we made a deck that did this and that, because the cool, interesting interactions that you get with the multiplayer and the 2v2 could open up a lot of fun doorways for new decks that on their own wouldn't do good, but when you have a support deck or something shoring up its weaknesses, could do some really exciting stuff. So like you said, we've had a couple events here, and in fact, at my locals, it's gotten so popular that we did a weekend win-a-box for 2v2, and it went over so well that people are already asking when the next 2v2 win-a-box weekend is, so we're going to be putting that on the calendar here pretty soon. I think it already is on the calendar, I just forgot what day it is, but it's coming up here either this Saturday or the Saturday after next, but yeah. The real
That is
question is,
awesome.
Dan, when is your store going to start doing some 2v2 tournaments?
Uh, well, I mean, I'm really inclined to get one on the schedule now. That's something that I have full power over. I can put it on the schedule whenever I want. I've been trying to keep up with everything and haven't had a chance to throw it on yet. So, yeah, I'll poll our locals on Tuesday on our next kind of local night and just say, hey, who would come to a Winnabox and what kind of maybe throw it on a weekend also? Like, what weekend do you want to do that? And see if we can get something like that rolling as well, because I think that would be a lot of fun. I'm also interested because in Magic the Gathering, my 2v2 two-headed giant is what it's called in that game experience was mostly at pre-releases with sealed deck, and I'm really curious to consider the idea of like a potential 2v2 draft or something where you and your partner sit on like, I don't know.
I
Yeah,
don't know why I didn't think of that.
in 2HG drafts, you normally sit next to each other and you draft together. So I think maybe you'd want to do that for the best experience. But yeah, you could have 4 teams of 2 that all draft a pod together. And I mean, that's a lot of fun too.
I didn't think about that. That'd be so sick because I really like you. I like the draft in Altered. It's very fun and enticing. But I didn't think like combine the two greatest modes of play into one and do a 2v2 draft format. I'll have to
Right.
ask the shop guy and see how he feels because he's into the game quite a bit, and actually by osmosis we've gotten a couple of the other people that work at the shop into the game and excited about the game. So
Nice.
maybe we can just do a random weekend where we're just like, hey, how about on this day we have a wild card event where it's just a 2v2 draft and see what happens. Or maybe not even 2v2, just like a free for all draft. Because I haven't played free for all mode. I will say that I've
Oh,
only played the 2v2 multiplayer mode. The free for all mode does sound really fun, but I'm particularly excited about the 2v2 mode because of the option to work with people, and it creates venues and paths that wouldn't normally be playable because you can have those two decks kind of working together and creating an interesting environment, along with the trappings of being like, I have two separate opponents, I need to be seeing what they're going to do and then pivot depending on what they do on each side of their field, and it's very exciting.
so Jordan, you mentioned that you're planning on constructing like specific 2v2 decks, but prior to this, you were playing with just, kind of your whatever decks you had. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the 2 events you played in with your decks? Like how did those decks operate? What did you learn playing against people? Did you have any like really awesome moments that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I believe she was playing. My wife was playing a Muna deck, so she had access to a lot of different anchored things like that, and she has a really killer unique that it's spacing out of my head now. But basically, it's along the lines of when you play another character, if you have like like 2 plants, then a target character gets anchored. And for those who
Mm,
don't know, some stipulations about the clarifications they have for multiplayer: if a card says target expedition or target character, you can target any expedition and any character in any of the 4 regions. So, as you'd imagine, she was able to both target her stuff, or if it was more pertinent, she could target stuff on my side of the field to help
right.
shore up our defense on certain spots. And I was playing an Axiom deck, which has a lot of the word spawn a thing in target expedition. So there was a lot of cheeky plays that I was able to do where they would think they were going to win a side, and then I'd play like a brass bug hive and then spawn a brass bug token on one of her fields that
Sure.
now just shifted the balance of that, and they'd be like, oh no, like what do I do now? Like I played my Shenlong for my whole turn. That's all I can do, and now there's a brass bug that just beat everything else on this field, and I have nothing else to play. It was very interesting. That's probably my favorite, is the ability to kind of like sway fields in different ways, or just the fact that it's a potential sway. There was a lot of talk in our opponents like, what should we do, because they could do this too. Like after they saw us do that the first time, they're like, oh yeah, we could be looking at our allies field and do stuff to them in addition to our own. So then they were like, just the threat of being able to potentially anchor something randomly drastically would change their turn to turn play, because they're like, I could do this now, but they could do this and that, or they may not have it in hand, or like, so there was a lot more like thinking and back and forth on what they should do, and like the different lines of play kind of branched out even more from there, which created a nice complex web of decision making.
Sure. And so for these two events, do you I think maybe the first one was quite a while back, a number of weeks ago, but do you remember your record and what you if maybe you remember a little bit about who you played against or what factions?
Yeah, so we played against one I specifically remember. I believe it was Muna and Muna, and they got
Okay.
dangerously close to winning with a Lyra festival.
No,
And the funny thing is, the
no.
dude had the Lyra festival. It wasn't built around it. He just had like a one-off in there in the off chance that something happened. But that made me really excited for the deck that we're going to make. I think the first team deck that me and my wife are going to make is going to be a Lyra festival win deck, because having two players with the ability to try to load stuff on one thing and place bodies in a different location is going to make that a lot more quickly viable than it is in 1v1. Like in 1v1, you can definitely do it, but it's a lot harder to dance that line. When you have two people working towards that goal, it's going to be different. But it may not be as easy to think either, because then you're probably having to put a lot of energy into doing that one thing, meaning your ally is probably just going to hemorrhage points at the end of every dusk phase because they're spending all their time putting it on
Right.
yours.
So just for the audio listeners who aren't aware of every card yet, Lyra Festival is a I believe it's 4 cost a landmark that says that at the end of the turn, if you have something with anchored, fleeting, you have something with anchored, something with fleeting, and something with a boost.
And they all have to be separate, so you need a
No, sorry,
minimum of 3
asleep,
bodies.
asleep,
Yeah, asleep, fleeting, and anchored.
and anchored. Yes, not a boost. Sorry, yeah, brain totally fizzled out there for a second. It's the illness, but you have all 3 of those counters, then you win the game. So this is a deck where, like, actually just last week, Ian is one of our locals who's super into the game with Ian and Kari. A lot of people know Kari, his wife, because she is the one who makes the custom tokens that she was
Mhm.
handing out to people like Gen Con and stuff. But those two are kind of, they really anchor our community here. And so they're here like every week that they can make it. And they're like driving out every, other days in the week, like to towns farther out just to support
They've
their all
made it
30
to a
fights.
draft or two over here too.
Yeah, they've
So.
driven 4 hours just to come to like a draft on a night or whatever, which is like wild. So just wanted to shout him out quick. But Ian last week was playing not last week, 2 days ago, was playing Muna Festival, Muna Lyra Festival, and we just did a quick kind of 3-round best of one. But in his first 2 rounds, he just turned 3, smoked 2 people with the get the rare Muna Festival. They puts one of the statuses on one of your things. And he just had the setup and just goes, whoops, I win the game turn 3, and then went up against me game 3, and I was holding the removal and he didn't draw the combo, and I got down Hydrocanas, and I was playing my ramp. I was having a good time. So the deck is. You may be like, I'm a little nervous about that deck in 2v2, because if your opponents don't have the answer, you can have both decks just playing Lyra Festival, and you just go, oh, who drew it? And then, boom, 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 we win.
That is half the reason I want to test it personally too, because I want to know if it's going to be too far on the good side, or if it's going to be like right in there.
I'm worried. I would say, like, right away, if they're ever gonna like do any sort of balancing, that would be a deck to maybe go, well, maybe this shouldn't be allowed. But at the same time, both opponents have access to playing removal for permanents and stuff, and have a higher chance of being able to see them and take them out. So
that is actually how we avoided losing to Lyra Festival, is I had a well-placed boom the turn before they were about to fulfill its requirement. So
nice. Yeah,
we still ended up losing that match, however. I think, if I remember correctly, one side got a Hydrocana, and I did not draw any more booms, and my wife did draw some sleeps, but sleep works well if you're close to victory. Not when you still have to deal with a Hydrocana that is near infinite.
Yeah, and it just keeps growing every turn still too. It's like, well,
You
maybe
can
if
only
I
put it
can
to
sleep
sleep
at the
so
rest of the
many
game.
turns.
Yeah, that was I was very similar actually to what happened in our game. Then he tried to sleep my Hydrocana. I was like, okay, sounds fine. But like you said, the Lyra Festival deck does hemorrhage points because they're doing a lot of like screwing around. And the turn they play the Moon Effect, I keep calling Moon Fest because they keep playing a Moon version. They have to keep the turn they play the Lyra Festival. If you ace it that turn, it's like a free turn for you. It's because like one of their things is asleep, right? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's like win with a token or whatever. So, but
And
yeah,
9 times out of 10, if you
interesting.
build that deck, you build a lot of cheap bodies because you need to
Yeah,
still be able to play the things to do the extra stuff. So on their own, 9 times out of 10, if it's turn 4 or 5 or more, that cheap body isn't a threat to you anyway, because you're like, well, I'll play my one thing and it already beats all three of your dudes.
right,
So
right. So Lyra Festival, that's a deck to maybe either look at building or be worried about playing against or something in a constructed 2v2 game. Were there any other decks that your opponents played that did anything kind of cool or had any memorable moments that you can talk about?
I do remember there was one where this gentleman dropped a Kraken 3 times in a row, and him and his allies' decks were built knowing that there is Krakens coming. Our decks were
Oh,
not as easily equipped to deal with a bunch of 8 water, only water tech. So,
that is really cool. You got like frog princes coming out being like, yeah, water, let's go.
yeah, so that one was another interesting one that I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that because yeah, the card says it changes all zones, not just ones you're like
Yeah.
expeditioning in. So it creates targets the whole map. So every single side is now water, and you're like, well, my cool mighty Jin here isn't doing anything anymore because it's a 4/4/0, and now it does nothing.
So if you use an effect, Jordan, to create, for example, a brass bug in your partner's expedition, they can. I unless I mean I guess I don't understand the exact ruling of the wording here, but can they sacrifice that to like a kraken or something?
They sure
Is it
can.
it's theirs to sacrifice, I suppose, at that point. So
Yeah, I don't. When I read through the comp rules, I don't think it mentioned like specific stuff like that. But we've just been ruling it like that because it's in their expedition; it's theirs,
yeah,
so they can. It just says sacrifice, 2 things,
yeah. I
and
just
it's
didn't know
on
if
their
there was like
field.
a weird ownership thing, like, well, it's in your expedition, but I own it, or I. But that's a really interesting route to take too and be like, okay, so this deck is the sacrifice deck and this deck's the token deck, and I just give them the tokens to sacrifice when they need them. Or like for example, boom, as you mentioned, just to sacrifice something to just discard a permanent or a character. Yeah, like if you have your partner who has just some extra like kind of create a token and target expedition, you can work together some like pretty cool little lines there, I think.
And I don't know if I don't. We've been ruling it like this. I don't know if that's like going to be an official ruling because again, the comp rules are mainly geared towards the 1v1. But when you have effects like Brass Bug Hive that says, when you spawn a robot, it gets +1/+1. So even though it's spawning in your allies, it would still. We've been ruling it. They still get the 1/1 because you, as
Sure.
the person, are spawning it, so it gets the 1/1. But that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to like get a better ruling on that specifically because it's not spawning in your expedition, but Brass Bug Hive doesn't say robots that you play in your expedition, just robots that you play, and you as the Axiom player are still playing the brass bug. But
Yeah.
along that note, you could have a cool deck where you have one that just focuses on spawning a bunch of tokens in their allies field, and then that ally that's getting all the tokens can focus on a bunch of cards that buff stuff. So then you can have like a bunch of charges
Sure.
and stuff and just be like, you
Sure.
spawn the bugs for me and I'll just buff them up to 1 million, and then we'll just capsize the game like that. There's just a lot of interesting, fun lines of play that I'm excited to explore about it.
Yeah,
And then,
that's go ahead.
then I was gonna say, and then the best part, or not the best part, but a part that I guess is up to the event's discretion. If it was up to me, I would recommend that you allow limit or like not limited, like some amount of table talk because in the rules it specifically says it's up to whoever's running the event how much you're able to communicate with people at the table. And for me, and I think you feel this way as well, because I know you're a big Commander guy, but the social aspects and the table talk is part of the reason that makes that game mode like
Mm,
thrive so much. Because like doing, making those under the table deals and what have you, or in this case, coordinating to some degree with your ally to figure out what to do without giving up your plan to the people that are listening to your left and right, I think is very fun as well. And then hearing the different stuff that they do, to like the code words they're trying to say, to be like, what are they planning? Like, what should we do? At our local shop, we allow table talk. We just say you can't give direct information. So if you were my ally, I couldn't be like, yeah, the 3 cards in my hand are this, this, and that. What should I do? Like, you can't do that sort of thing. But I could be like, I have access to give you anchor if you want to throw something down. Like, I could maybe anchor that.
sure,
And then
sure.
it's fun. I know some people don't like the table talk. There has been a couple times where people are like, I want no one to talk at all during the game. And to me, it's not as exciting because it's just like you play in silent. It hasn't happened to me personally, but one of the other gentlemen at my locals that I was talking to, he did run into a guy that was in our 2v2 tournament who was like adamant. He was like, I don't want any table talk. No one say anything. Everyone kind of, he was like, it was just kind of weird because we all just sat there in silence until he won the game with Lyra Festival just randomly. He just was like doing stuff, and then he played it. And he was just like,
Huh.
Lyra Festival, I win. And he was like, it was just weird because apparently they just sat in silence, and the only thing that was spoken the whole game was, I play Lyra Festival, I win the game, which doesn't seem as fun. But to each
No.
their own.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I have some speculation as to why then he wanted that, but it's not my place, I guess. That's
And the best part was, not to interrupt, but the best part was that particular pod of 4 people were all singletons. So we didn't have like not everyone. The first time we did the event, not everyone had like a
mm,
distinct team. So they just like paired random people up each time, and like that was that dude's teammate for that game, and he was just like didn't know him, didn't even know it was in his deck. It was just they were just playing in silence, just seeing what happened. It was just see it. It sounded really
wow.
weird.
What a strange situation that is. So you have some really incredible fun teamwork games, and then you have whatever that was. So I guess you have lots of variety in 2v2. So Jordan, what were your scores in the 2 matches? Like go ahead and let everyone know how good or bad you are at this game. The two
If I remember
tournaments.
correctly, the first one we went 2-2. We could have went 3-1, but my wife is new to card games. She learned a very valuable lesson about how good removal and pseudo removal is,
Yeah.
because we knew that one of our opponents was going to play Shenlong again because it was in their reserve and they had already played it. And she made the mistake of looking at her hand and going, I don't need this removal card, and instead kept 2 creatures. And then the Shenlong was the end of us. But like I
Shoot.
don't knock her for it. She doesn't have the
No.
breadth of experience we have. So, but now
Everybody has to learn that at
every
some point.
game past that, she's like, no, I don't ever do that again. Like if I know there's something, she keeps it. She uses it at a learning moment. Now, anytime
Very
she
good.
sees a big threat, she's like, all right, this is staying in the hand. Got to keep this. So,
So now that she's become an expert, when you guys played in the second tournament, how did that go?
she actually wasn't part of the second tournament. She had some other stuff going on.
Oh,
She wasn't able to play. So I was just with randos, but that was still fun.
okay.
Just being paired up with random people was also fun. Just the game in general was great. And that one, of course, I didn't have time to prepare any decks. I haven't had a ton of time to like do stuff this weekend. However, the only thing on the docket is sorting and categorizing cards for all the card games I have. Because for those of you who don't know, to my right, I have a secondary table that was supposed to be temporary that now has a bunch of Grand Archive and altered cards in different stacks. Most of them are sorted. I just haven't put them away or like scanned in some of the altered cards. So this weekend, that'll all be taken care of, and then I'll have time to think of new decks and change the 6 altered decks we currently have, because I have like a change log of stuff that's like this has to come out. Like right now, I have 2 Mind Hypotheses in my Bravos deck, which in my head I was like, this is going to be sick. I'm going to be playing Kaibaras and Shenlongs for free, and every
Yeah.
single time I've played Mind Hypothesis, it's either whiffed completely, or I'd be like, cool, I'm paying 9 to play 2 Blade Masters that normally cost 1 apiece. So that's going out, and it frees up 2 rare spots, which is important because there's a couple cards in there that I'd much have rather be a rare than a common. So
I have the Mind Apotheosis in the old Arakan Kibble, and you know, I actually it hasn't happened yet. Still, I haven't gotten it on the flip, but there's always the potential that you at noon you get your Arakan Kibble free card off the top. It's Apotheosis, boom! It's 2 more cards, and then at that point, even if it's 2 little things like
you played it for free, yeah.
whatever, like sure, you're still probably gonna win that round, to be honest. But yeah, that's that is a fun card for the gamblers inside of us all.
For
Yeah,
sure.
so okay, that's really cool. I'm excited to hear what decks you come up with for constructed, because you know we did go through a number of kind of interesting, I think a number of interesting strategies. There's some, like I said, I think there's some sacrifice shenanigans in both like Ortis and Izmir where you can pass, or even just straight passing tokens around. Buffing, as you said, Jordan, you like one person buffs and the other person plays tokens to the board, and that's like a potential good strategy. Is there anything that you've seen for like for Bravos, for example? Because I haven't, I think like we've talked about like Lyra and Muna having festival tricks. We talked about Ortis and Izmir having some like token nonsense, and Axiom too. What does Bravos get to do in 2v2? Like, I kind of wonder if there's any factions that are like better or worse than other ones.
Bravos, I think, has some very good things to bring to the table because they have a lot of target character gets boost and or remove fleeting, which is very important because sometimes
Oh, okay.
you removing fleeting off of your stuff isn't as relevant, but if your opponent just played something really exciting, removing fleeting so it stays on the field or stays in reserve and being able to play again is
Your
very
partner.
important.
When your
Yeah, your
partner
partner.
plays something exciting. I mean, you
Sorry.
could be a
Yeah.
nice person and do it to your opponent's thing too.
Yeah, so sorry. But yeah, being able to remove fleeting off of your allies, clutch cards or key things, like if you were paired with a Kraken deck, you can be like, cool, do you want to play Kraken a third time? Sick, remove fleeting off it. Be prepared to deal with this again. Various things like that, I think, are still going to be very potent. And don't underestimate the random target character gets boost 1. A lot of times you're just one off, you're
Yeah.
tied and you aren't moving. And being able to just reach over the table and be like, I'll give you a boost. Boom. Or the spicy all in play. Just be like, yeah, you need a couple boosts. Let's roll the die and see what happens.
Love a good all in. Yeah, okay, that's fair. You know, I think the ability just to increment things. Bravos has more access to things that can just increment buff boost counters at will in altered. So that's pretty cool. I think for me, if I was going to build a deck and work with a partner, I would play Muna because I love Muna. That should surprise nobody. But I really like the idea of being able to just anchor down any random thing that gets played by my partner. When we're like, yeah, I think actually that Kraken is going to stick around for a couple of turns.
Or
Sounds
another
pretty
great
fun.
anchor target is Tomoe. She costs 3.
Oh, Tomoe goes and does cost 3 and is very large. Ooh, that's fun. I'm surprised I haven't thought of that just for like draft yet as a draft interaction. If you could draft Arjun and Spike and then all the Tomoes, you just got to get a few turns into the game and then you can just
I just thought of something else too. There's those removal cards that normally like they put stuff into. You could help an opponent ramp really hard, really fast in this game too, because they could build ramp like the Bravos ramp package, and you could play. Is it Mana Reaping?
mana
The one where
reaping.
they put a
Yep.
character into, so you can help double ramp them, and then start dropping like huge, gigantic bodies on the field. That would be a pretty sick play too.
Wow. That's true.
Just like turn 4, they're dropping Kaibaras already on the field.
Yeah, that I was trying to think like Hydrocana. I don't think even if your friend helps you can get Hydrocanas out on turn 2. I think 7 is gated because from being able to get it out on turn 2. But you can get 6 drops out on turn 2, which You could get that like the big old son of Yggdrasil or something out there. And you're like, yep,
Eh,
yep, winning on these sides. And then I like the idea too of this is both a Muna and a Bravos thing, but Aja is a card I've really grown to love. I think Aja is actually an insane card. Never once in my life have I thought that giving my opponent a mana as well as myself has affected them any stronger than it affected me. In fact, I'm quite confident 100% of the games I played Aja in, that mana that we both got helped me a lot more than them.
yeah,
And
especially if your deck is catered to like a slightly more expensive stuff. Because sure,
exactly.
you're giving them a mana, but your mana is building towards a huge thing that they need an answer for or they lose. They might just be able to play like a second, like mid-sized to low-sized guy. And that's fine for you.
Right. So what I'm thinking here is in 2v2, you can have for example a Muna and a Bravos deck, and both of them are playing sets of Aja, and you could just go to town. Maybe turn 2, you're both dropping Ajas, like everybody gets 2 more mana, and then the next turn, yeah, you're like
Oh yeah, because it's
Kaibaras and
each player.
Hydrocanas.
Oh my god, I
It's
didn't even
each
think about
player.
that.
Yeah, it's you and your friend and both of your opponents.
Oh yeah. So the
So,
Bravos player can start with mana channeling and Tiny Jin,
mhm.
and
So can
then
the Muna
next
player,
turn,
to be fair.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's because that's what my
Um,
deck is.
or no, they can't, can they? Because they have the version of Tiny Jin that costs 2, right? Like by base.
Tiny Jin in Muna costs 2 and uh gets a gets a boost counter from Tasia and Naura. So it's fine. It sets itself up.
Yeah, I'm just saying because he won't be able to do the turn 1 because mana channeling costs 2.
Oh yeah,
It works in Bravos because the regular version costs 1, so
you
you can
can't do
play
both of
both
them.
turn 1. Yeah, but you can do that turn 1, then turn 2 you both play Aja, and that would be 1, 2, 3, so 4, and then you play one for turn, the one for Aja, the one for the Tiny Jin. You'll go into turn 3 with 9. You could
Yeah.
start playing Kaibaras on turn 3.
Let's
Oh my god!
go. Let's go.
Oh,
Hey,
that's
how far away are we right now? That's how much tough it has.
oh yeah, because the tough X. Oh man,
The
it'll
tough
just
is
be
more than
non-removable.
the amount of mana you have. No, not quite, because you'll have ramped them too. But like, yeah. I mean, this sounds to me like exactly the kind of absolute like Timmy nonsense that I want to get into in 2v2. So if I go to a 2v2 match, I'm gonna find someone who wants to play this nonsense with me. Like, no, whatever. We're gonna have 12 mana on turn 4, and just like anything can happen at that point. That
Oh
sounds
man,
like a
yeah,
lot of fun.
that does sound super sick. Um, Another thing I definitely want to touch on too is we've been talking a lot about 2v2 because that's what I personally played, but I am very still interested in the FFA because even though you don't have like the ally dynamic, you have the dynamic of those cards still in the game where you can spawn stuff in any expedition, things like that. So there's going to be non-zero times where that classic commander style table talk where you can still shut down other people that are winning by helping other people on the table to beat them
Right.
on that side. So even though you're not an ally, Dan, if you're on kitty corner from me and Jimmy on the right side is one away from winning and you don't have enough to stop him on your side and he all in against you, well, I could just spend my turn putting like brass bug tokens and buffing your guys to make sure you beat him or tie him on that side. Or I can use my removal on anyone on the board. So if I want you guys to tie instead of one of you winning, I can remove your like Ortis cadet or something. Now you guys are tied and I'm still advancing them. So there's still a lot of
Right.
interesting interplay between the 3 other opponent fields that I think are really going to be an interesting space to explore.
Yeah, and it's not even so much like I think a lot of people who get into Commander, for example, in Magic, just as an example, are they like the game, they like the big decks, they like the fun, the just the casual nature, but they don't care for the politicking. They don't, they get into it and they're like, I don't want to make deals. I don't want to wheel and deal and try and talk my way out of something or whatever. That's not something that they want to do. But in this, you mentioned that I think it's totally possible to be like, hey, I'll remove fleeting from your thing if you don't stop me over here or whatever. But you also can just straight up like, well, I literally need to give Jordan a brass bug right now. Otherwise his opponent's going to win. It's just like actually built into the game. You have to look at the whole board and be like, well, shoot, like where do I need to apply this? because it might. This brass bug doesn't help me win, but it can stop Jordan's opponent from winning, right? So I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, so I'm definitely excited to explore the FFA at some point as well. But yeah, the 2v2 can tell you from experience, the 2v2 is like the Poggy-Woggy way to play. I highly recommend everyone try it out at least once. If you end up not liking it, to each their own, but I think the 2v2 format is one that should be considered in the future because it is very, very fun and very interesting to play, whether you're with a specific person that you're planning on being a teammate, and even when you're just paired with random people as a teammate. It's fun either way.
I think, Jordan, the coolest thing in the world would be if some major events, convergence level events that get held are 2v2, so that you and I can maybe go play them like as the team main deck team fleeting thoughts, whatever we want to call ourselves or whatever. But like, I think that would be a ton of fun to get to just go to these events and actually like play as a team in a major event like that. But even if they don't do it as the main event, I'm certain we'll have side events at these for 2v2 or free for all or whatever. And I'm really looking forward to exploring that.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I think they sent out surveys during the Kickstarter too, asking like what people wanted to see at a side events. And I definitely put like the multiplayer stuff on there, and of course draft stuff like that. And then I also put like other wacky stuff. But based on their track record so far from what we've seen, I have no doubt they're going to have an excellent selection of side events at the convergence level events. It'll be a grand time. I'm very excited for the first convergence level event to go to it. I'm very excited.
Yeah. Going to be a ton of fun. Well, Jordan, do you have anything else you wanted to share about multiplayer formats, or are we going to actually stay true to our word and end this podcast early instead of saying this will be a short one, guys, and then it's an hour and a half long?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything super major that I can think of. We hit all the main highlights of the multiplayer format that I've had in my experience anyway. So yeah, unless you had any other questions. Do we have any mailbag questions for today?
No, and I don't believe we currently have any fresh. Oh, you know what though? Actually, hang on. I think there is one. I think it just had been so long since we did an episode that I forgot that someone did leave a mailbag question. Well, unless I missed one, I actually lied, and you probably saw a little edited version of that. But I thought we had a mailbag question, but we didn't. But we could in the future, if you all go ahead and leave a comment on this video down below with hashtag mailbag written in the comment right at the top, and then let us know what you want us to talk about. If you have any questions or anything just you want us to cover on a future episode, we'd love to have that. You also can email maindeckgames@gmail.com with subject line Fleeting Thoughts Mailbag. That is another way to get in touch with us, especially if you want it to be not out in the open, a little more private or something. That's always an option too. So drop us some mailbag stuff and we'll toss them in and we'll go over them in the next episode.
Yeah. But yeah, Dan, for the sake of your health, that will be all for today. That was our Fleeting Thoughts. We thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we hope to talk to you guys in about 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye, everyone. I'm going to bed.